It is an honor to welcome you to this Money and Banking Conference of the Central Bank of Argentina. I would like to thank you for your time, for your presence, the presence of all friends who have come to Argentina to teach us over this day and a half. We have undertaken this conference in the certainty that Argentina still has a long way to go in terms of macroeconomic stability, but also aware of the fact that the problems we face are no different from those facing the countries that the representatives come from. We thus have the opportunity to listen to and learn from those experiences. When we took office, we set three topics that would be core to our term of office: reducing inflation, developing the financial market, and promoting new technologies in the monetary system, with our target being removing the use of cash from our economy. Let me, by way of introduction, to tell you briefly what developments we have achieved in 9 months in office along each of these lines, also reviewing what we have prepared for you on these topics and which we will develop over this day and a half. We said from the very beginning that our primary objective would be to achieve monetary stability. That is, having low inflation and one that would be foreseeable, a reliable currency for our population. In starting this process, early on, we had to adopt crucial measures. On 17 December, we decided to disassemble much of the regulatory machinery called as cepo, or the rigging or the pegging of the peso. Remember that the board meeting where we implemented the changes started at midday and finished at 2 a.m. in the morning. It was a full day of discussions and preparations where we did minute surgery in order to disassemble a whole system without generating uncertainty. Subsequently, we focused on doing away with the monetary surplus that we had inherited, generated through excessive money issue, and the future contracts that had been sold by late February. With the monetary market operating closer to normal, we adopted interest rate as a monetary policy instrument. Inflation was still high, so we decided to set the rate at 38% per annum in March, and we maintained it in that level until there were true signals that inflation was starting to come down. From then on, the rate has gone down by more than 10 percentage points, accompanying a significant decrease in the inflation rate. In April, once the conflict with holdouts had been solved, the central bank submitted its monetary policy program for 2016 and the inflation targets for coming years. Back then, we said that in September we would announce the operational framework for an inflation targeting system. In furtherance of that objective, we have already said that on Monday, 26 September, that is next Monday, will be the day when we will actually make the presentation on that. But starting in April already, inflation expectations showed a decreasing trend, converging to 1.5 per month, a clarification for foreign visitors, starting in September. Today, as I said, we may say that inflation information has accompanied that decreasing trend. Let's take the inflation rate calculated by the city of Buenos Aires, since the one submitted by INDEC, the Argentine Statistics Census Institute, is only available from May. 6% in April because of increases in utilities after a decade where the rates had been frozen. Then 4% in May, 3% in June, 2% in July, and 0.9% in August. This last figure was actually lower, minus 0.8, but the difference in values is the result of the reversal of gas prices, which will be revisited in coming months. This progress, however, did not mean that we have won the battle, especially because that 1% inflation, 1% per month, is still high, a figure which only positions us where, as we surely know, many countries undertook their battle against inflation. The objective was to have low inflation that will nurture growth with an annual inflation rate of 5% by 2015. Thus, we consider that the battle against inflation is just beginning. Likewise, what has happened so far is like preparing the battlefield in the fight against inflation. And as I said, that battle is about to start. It is here where understanding the process that other countries undertook becomes of the essence. And we are extremely honored to listen to that story from the mouth of its protagonist. Kamil Flood will tell us about the extraordinary success of Israel, which shares many of the features of the Argentinian case. José de Gregorio will tell us about the process in Chile. As we know, the most successful story in the region, and Arminio Fraga about Brazil. He himself being responsible for a transcendental change in terms of stabilization in an economy which, back in the 80s, had faced a far more complex inflationary process than that of Argentina, supplemented by the always critical and profound thinking of Guillermo Calvo from Columbia University, whom we welcome back to the central bank, and I will explain why later. Let me now move on to the second line of discussion, that is financial development. As with the lowering inflation theory and practice, this is yet another axis along which we need to work to progress in equality. Banks have the role of transforming terms, creating time for financial system users. It's financial assets, long-term financial assets that allow a family to buy their homes, a businessman or an SME owner to grow his or her business, or a large company to invest in projects that will transform the country's economic metrics. Without a strong financial system, there won't be equality in distribution, because only those who do have money already will be able to invest, thus upholding economic structures which are already established and depriving sending social mobility processes from dynamism. Today, the financial system in Argentina is transactional. It only lends 15% of GDP to the private sector, 4 times less than Brazil, 5 times less than Chile. By way of example, over 80% of peso-denominated deposits have a residual term of less than a month, so these loans are biased in the short term and do not contribute significantly to equality and development mechanisms. How come we got to this situation, to this point? In Argentina, there has been a trend to save in foreign currency and to keep it outside the financial system. There are people who say that this is a cultural feature of Argentinians. I think, however, that it is rather the consequence of a story of macroeconomic volatility, where the return on savings options in the financial system in local currency have been systematically lower compared to the return on other assets. This may have developed a culture, but in any case, it is part of an evolution underpinned by very specific economic components, which I'm convinced may be easily reversed if economic incentives change. I want to illustrate this by something that I have mentioned before. A person who invested 100 pesos in a time deposit with an Argentinian bank in the early 80s, 100 pesos would have today only 1.5 pesos. That is, after 35 years, this person would have lost in real terms 98% of the investment. That is not a very good return. Let's compare that to other typical investment options selected by Argentinian savers, namely real property and US dollars, cash. Those who invested in real property in 1981 would have a 600% return, considering capitalization in the real estate market of the rental income that this person would have obtained. The investment in US dollar bills would not have allowed to maintain the purchasing power. only 77% of that original 100%. But nonetheless, both options are far better than the 1.5% that I mentioned before. This is far from being just sheer coincidence. I mean, the fact that our financial system is small and purely transactional. Faced with this, we have set the pillars that we want to base the sector's development on. Firstly, we allowed banks to freely set the interest rate that will be suitable to reward depositors for their savings. But we have also introduced regulatory changes to generate more transparency and competition in the sector so that banks will provide more incentives to Argentine savers to go to the system. Even more important is the first axis, that is bringing down inflation, because it will provide more players certainty to engage in longer-term contractual arrangements. In these few months, Argentina has already recovered an interest rate curve in pesos, which is now 2 years ahead of time, and it will extend further as we consolidate our decrease of inflation. During dinner, I was told that peso issued a currency in 3 years. After the tequila effect, it took it 3 years to have a 3-year curve. We have a peso curve with a 2-year term already. In cooperation with this process, we introduced UVA's credit and deposit, that is inflation-protected investments that allow banks, depositors, and debtors to know for certain what the actual value of their assets and liabilities will be in future, so that they can undertake projects in a longer horizon. Here we replicated the Chilean example. Lastly, this is accompanied by prudential regulations that have reached the highest international standards and which remove the risk of systemic crisis. The central bank has followed the prudential regulations with really extraordinary professional zealous, and there are people who started this process back in the 90s. Today we have 2 blocks dedicated to these topics. First, we will listen to Robert Townsend, and Raghuram Raham on financial development. Raghu has not only had a varied as a pricing career that has led him to be chief economist of the central bank and governor of Central Bank of India, but also being the economist who identified before anyone else the problems with incentives that would lead a few years later into the Lehman Brothers crisis. About Robert Townsend, let alone say that one of his books is called Financial Systems in Developing Economies, to know that he has a lot to tell us. Also, we have set up a panel with bankers from the private sector, Enrique Cristofani, from the public sector, Juan Curuchet, and from international agencies, Andrew Powell, so that from the viewpoint of those who are there in the playing field, they may share their vision on what is left to be done. They will surely give us good ideas to bet on our financial system so that it will grow, see to more sectors in the population, extend financing terms, and contribute to development and equal opportunities. We now come to the third axis of this conference that will be developed tomorrow morning, that is new technologies and innovations in payment means. Our objective here is to contribute to the use of banking services, that is the formalization of our economy. An economy with a lower use of cash is one where corruption, informality, tax evasion, and drug trafficking will be impaired. An economy that uses banking services is a fairer one because, as a result, tax burdens are more equally distributed, making them lower for everyone. Here we have a very interesting agenda because there is a revolution in terms of means of payment throughout the world. Here at the central bank, we have taken measures to promote electronic transfers and speed up the formalities and the things that clients can do from their mobiles and internet, and the use of electronic payments. Here we are interested in the vision to be shared by experts tomorrow, because we want to make further progress so that our system will be more efficient and safer. Here and fairer. Here we will have a panel formed by Stefan Ingves, governor of the Swedish Central Bank, and Fernando Alvarez from Chicago University. Stefan has turned Sweden into a leader in terms of means of payment reconversion, minimizing the use of cash. During the bilateral meetings at Basel, I have benefited enormously from his experience. And tomorrow it will be very interesting to listen to him. The same with Fernando Alvarez, an expert in macroeconomics and monetary policy, but which has also modeled payment decisions of economic agents. Also, we have arranged another panel on means of payment, bringing together a regulator from an emerging council, Lorenzo Martinez Triguero from the Bank of Mexico, an operator, Gilberto Caldar from Mastercard, a payment system, which has been invited to tell us about the British experience, where the regulator forced banks to get rid of payment networks, and that was acquired by Mastercard. That's why we have invited him. Osvaldo Jimenez from Mercado Pago, representing alternative means of payments from the point of view of an Argentinian multinational company that lists on the New York Stock Exchange, and Julian Copinaro, who will give us the perspective of the innovator who wants to compete with all the rest, and who is central to an ecosystem that is dynamic and innovative. Finally, we will have a panel with our colleagues Ilan Goldfan and Rodrigo Vergara, whom we deeply thank for their time, so that they will tell us what challenges their economies face at present. As you can see, we have invited experts in manifold and very material topics for this Central Bank of Argentina. I want to deeply thank them for having accepted this invitation and for being here with us, and also thank the audience that will assist and listen to the conferences, both here in person and those who will be listening remotely. Just a small fraction of those who are attending the event are physically present here. The conference is being broadcast via streaming and rebroadcast by other universities in the provinces. Thanks to all of them for accompanying us. This technology also allowed us to host the conference at our own venue, which is a source of pride for the institution. The bank's staff has opened a mobile app where you will find all the presentations, information on panel members, among other things, and I invite you to have a look. Lastly, because I'm told that my time has run out, those who are visiting with us, I recommend that you take a few minutes to visit our coin museum. As you can imagine, the history of currency in Argentina has a lot to tell. Once again, welcome. And yes, now let's put down to work. Thank you.